The French Open this year, not one women's match has been scheduled for centre court. That's Philippe Chatrier in the primetime evening.
The French Open just did something they've never done for a 20-year-old Filipina, and the entire tennis world is losing it.
Ang French Open main draw slot ni Alexandra Eala sa kabila ng early exit niya sa ilang tournament this month. Huling lumaban si Alex.
Let me paint you a picture. Imagine one of the most prestigious tennis tournaments on the planet. A Grand Slam that has been running for over a century, where legends like Rafael Nadal, Steffi Graf, and Serena Williams have cemented their immortality on red clay. And now imagine that tournament's own director going on live television, not to talk about defending champions, not to hype up seeded superstars, but to personally, passionately, and very publicly roll out the red carpet for a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines. That is not a scene from a feel-good sports movie. That is not some social media rumor. That is exactly what happened at Roland Garros in 2026. And if you think that is not a massive deal, then you have clearly been sleeping on Alexandra Eala. And today is your wake-up call. Because what Amélie Mauresmo, the director of the French Open and a former world #1 herself, said about Alexandra Eala was not a polite diplomatic mention.
Ang dami akong nakitang Pinoy, dami kong nakitang Pinoy, and nagulat din ako, hindi ko inakalang ang dami-daming Pinoy dito sa Rome, pero
It was not a casual shout-out. It was a full, genuine, deeply felt recognition of a young woman who, in just over a year, has transformed from a promising rising talent into what many are now calling one of the most important figures in the entire global sport of tennis. Mauresmo spoke with visible admiration. She spoke about Eala's power, her movement, her variety, and the sheer physical strength that she brings onto the court. She talked about personally welcoming Eala to Roland Garros in a special and thoughtful way, making sure this young Filipina sensation felt at home, felt valued, and felt respected before a single serve had even been struck in the main draw. And she acknowledged, without any hesitation, the enormous tidal wave of fan support that was expected to flood into Paris specifically to watch Eala compete on the iconic clay courts of one of tennis's most sacred venues. Now stop for just a second and let that sink in. The director of the French Open, one of only 4 Grand Slam tournaments in the entire world, personally ensuring a young player feels comfortable and welcomed before the tournament starts, and then going on television to tell the entire world about it. That does not happen for just anybody. That does not happen because a player has a decent ranking or wins a few matches. That happens because something genuinely extraordinary is going on, and the people at the very top of the sport are paying very close attention. So who exactly is Alexandra Eala, and why is the tennis world suddenly treating her like royalty? Let us get into it, because her story is one of the most remarkable things happening in sports right now. Alexandra Eala was born in Quezon City in the Philippines, and she trained at the legendary Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain. Yes, the same academy founded by the greatest clay court player who ever lived. That foundation alone tells you something about the level of discipline and belief that has been built into her game from a very young age. Standing at 5'9", playing left-handed, and currently ranked inside the world's top 45 on the WTA Tour, Eala has been building toward this moment with a relentlessness that has genuinely started to frighten the established order of women's tennis. But here is the thing that most people outside the Philippines already knew, and that the rest of the world is now rapidly figuring out. Alexandra Eala is not just a tennis player. She is a phenomenon. She is a cultural moment. She is the kind of athlete that comes along once in a generation and makes an entire nation, and then an entire continent, feel represented on the biggest stages in the world. And the numbers and stories emerging from the tournaments she has played in over the past several months prove beyond any reasonable doubt that her impact extends far beyond anything that can be measured simply by wins, losses, and ranking points. Cast your mind back to the Miami Open. When Eala stepped onto the courts at that tournament, something shifted in the atmosphere that veteran tennis observers said they had rarely, if ever, experienced before. The stands filled in a way they simply do not for most players. The energy inside the stadium became something genuinely electric, the kind of noise and passion and collective emotion that transforms a tennis match into something far bigger than a sporting event. Ticket prices reportedly surged to levels that surprised even longtime followers of the sport. Demand was extraordinary. And perhaps most significantly, the audiences showing up were not just the usual tennis crowd. They were new fans. They were Filipino fans who had never bought a tennis ticket in their lives. They were Asian viewers who had never seriously followed the WTA Tour, but were now glued to every single point Eala played, unable to look away. James Blake, the tournament director at Miami, recognized almost immediately what was unfolding in front of him. He made the smart, strategic, and ultimately brilliant decision to place Eala on the biggest courts available, giving as many people as possible the chance to witness her live. It worked beyond anyone's expectations. She became the defining face of the Miami Open that year, not through winning the title, but through the sheer magnetic power of her presence, her performances, and the connection she had built with fans from every corner of the globe. She had entered Miami as a wild card. She left as a global phenomenon. And then, when her run at Miami ended in the round of 16, something happened that tournament organizers had simply not prepared for. The atmosphere deflated almost overnight. Ticket demand, which had been through the roof during her matches, dropped sharply. The buzz that had electrified every corner of the venue seemed to evaporate almost instantly. Revenue that had been tracking at extraordinary levels reportedly fell significantly once Eala was no longer in the draw. It was a jarring, unmistakable lesson for everyone involved in running major tennis events, and the message it sent was impossible to ignore. Alex Eala was not just one of many interesting storylines at the Miami Open. She was the engine driving an enormous portion of the tournament's energy, attention, and financial momentum.
Because what was happening around her was not simply a fan popularity contest. It was something much more structurally important to the future of the sport. Eala was doing something that tennis has desperately needed for years. She was breaking through cultural and demographic walls that the sport has struggled to penetrate. She was pulling in viewers and fans from markets that had never been deeply engaged with professional tennis before. She was making the sport feel relevant, exciting, and emotionally meaningful to millions of people who had never had a player to connect with in the way that Filipinos and Asians broadly could now connect with her. And it is precisely that understanding, the deep, commercial, cultural, and strategic understanding of what Alex Eala represents for the future of tennis, that explains why Amélie Mauresmo and the entire French Open organization decided to do something they very rarely do. They decided to publicly, visibly, and enthusiastically declare that this player matters, that she is special, that Roland Garros sees her not merely as a ranked competitor in a 128-player women's singles draw, but as one of the most important figures arriving in Paris for the 2026 edition of the tournament. Mauresmo's decision to personally welcome Eala and to speak about it openly on television was a deliberate statement. The fact that Roland Garros reportedly invested significant thought and planning into the scheduling of Eala's matches, with the specific goal of accommodating the massive crowds expected to travel from the Philippines, from across Southeast Asia, and from around the world, underlines just how seriously the French Open is taking her presence. These are not small gestures. These are meaningful, intentional decisions by one of the biggest sporting institutions in the world, and they reflect a very clear-eyed recognition of what Eala already means to the global reach of the sport. Now, it is worth being honest about where Eala stands as a clay court competitor heading into Roland Garros 2026, because this is tennis, and results on the court are ultimately what matter most. Her clay season has been one of genuine growth and hard-earned lessons. She reached the third round of the Italian Open in Rome, her best ever result at that prestigious WTA 1000 event, beating quality opponents before running into the world number 2 Elena Rybakina, who edged past her in a hard-fought contest. Before Rome, she had competed in Stuttgart, Linz, and Madrid, collecting valuable clay court experience and continuing the physical and mental development that her team has been working on intensively. After Rome, she shifted focus toward the WTA 500 Strasbourg Open as her final tune-up event before the main draw at Roland Garros begins. She is building her relationship with clay deliberately, methodically, and with the kind of self-awareness that suggests a player who genuinely understands what it takes to compete at the very highest level. Eala herself said it perfectly after her loss to Rybakina in Rome, and the spirit of her words, as paraphrased from reports, was essentially this: there are many things to work on, but she is moving in the right direction. She is a better player physically and mentally than she was a year ago, and she has every intention of proving that on the biggest stage available. That mentality, that refusal to be diminished by setbacks, is one of the things that makes her fanbase so passionate and so loyal. It is one of the reasons people feel such a deep emotional investment in her journey. She does not pretend things are easy. She does not hide behind polished PR responses. She competes, she struggles, she learns, she improves, and she comes back stronger. And that authenticity resonates with people in a way that manufactured celebrity simply cannot replicate. Roland Garros 2026 runs from May 24th through to June 7th, and Eala enters the main draw ranked inside the world's top 45. She is part of a remarkable emerging wave of Southeast Asian talent that also includes Indonesia's Janice Chen, currently inside the top 40 and making her Roland Garros debut, and Thailand's Lorna Terudi, who recently broke into the top 100. The rise of this regional group, already nicknamed the Cistas by their growing global fanbase, represents one of the most exciting storylines in women's tennis right now. And leading that wave, carrying the hopes and dreams of millions of passionate supporters, is Alexandra Eala. What happens at Roland Garros 2026 cannot be predicted. Tennis is a sport full of surprises, upsets, and drama that no one can script in advance. But one thing that can be stated with complete confidence is this: when Alexandra Eala walks out onto those legendary red clay courts in Paris, the atmosphere will change. The energy will shift. Fans from the Philippines and from across Southeast Asia and from virtually every corner of the world will be in those stands, screaming their lungs out for a 20-year-old girl from Quezon City who has already changed the way this sport looks at global audiences and the power of representation. The French Open has prepared for that moment. Amélie Mauresmo has publicly acknowledged that moment. And now, all that is left is for Alexandra Eala to go out there and create it. One thing is absolutely certain: Paris will never feel quite the same once she steps onto those courts, and the entire tennis world will be watching every single point she plays. This is not just a sports story. This is history being made in real time, and you are watching it happen. If you are as fired up about this as we are, make sure you smash that like button right now, because every single click helps this channel grow and keep stories like this one coming your way. Drop your predictions for Eala's run at Roland Garros 2026 in the comments below. How far do you think she goes? And who is her toughest potential opponent on those clay courts in Paris? We want to hear everything you think. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, because with Alexandra Eala at the French Open, this is going to be one of the most talked about tournaments in years, and you do not want to miss a single moment of the coverage. This is the story the whole world is watching, and we are right here telling it to you first.
At the French Open this year, not one women's match has been scheduled for centre court. That's Philippe Chatrier in the primetime evening slot. And guess...
Secured pa rin ang French Open main draw slot ni Alexandra Eala sa kabila ng early exit niya sa ilang tournament this month.